When cameras initially started up in 2010, no one imagined the cultural whirlwind that would ensue. Reality television was already filled with tales of strange families, dysfunctional homes, and non-traditional lives. Keeping Up with the Kardashians and John and Kate Plus, 8 had conditioned viewers to anticipate drama, secrets, and unfiltered emotion from families who were willing to have their lives exposed. But what American living rooms were about to see from TLC was something different, something that pushed not only conceptions of marriage and family, but also the limits of reality television itself. That year, the world met Kody Brown, a man whose life was something that viewers had never before witnessed. With a warm smile, a boundless energy, and his signature curly blonde hair, which appeared to bounce as much as his spirit, Kody was introduced as the anchor of a family that broke all conventional molds. He was more than a husband. He was a husband of 4 wives, Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn. And they had together constructed a huge family of 18 kids. It wasn't a work of fiction. It wasn't a film. This was their actual existence. And now the world was invited to observe. The premiere of Sister Wives set the tone right from the beginning. The audience watched as Kody drove from home to home, splitting his time between various wives and children, smiling broadly as if nothing in his existence was out of the ordinary. He proudly elaborated that he practiced plural marriage, not out of lust or selfishness, but because it was a practice within his religion and his definition of family. He envisioned a large family, all love, children, and bonded together, and he really felt that his wives were not competitors but helpmates in creating that ideal. Harmony to him, chaos waiting to boil to the audience. Meri was introduced first, his legal wife. She had been with him since 1990, the woman who stood by his side when this plural dream was still just an idea. There was a sadness in her eyes even then, a quietness that hinted at the struggles she had endured as Kody's first wife, watching others enter the marriage after her. Then there was Janelle, the second wife, who was quite the opposite of Meri. She was practical and strong, a woman most commonly described as the one that kept the family down to earth. Christine, the third wife, was a bubbly, kind-hearted woman whose very existence appeared to be constructed around caring for the children and filling the home with happiness. Last to arrive was Robyn, the newest and youngest wife. She came into the family with 3 children from a prior marriage and soon was a figure at the center, not only in the family, but in the saga that audiences would be following for over a decade. These 4 women were introduced beyond names and faces. They provided a glimpse into a system few Americans had ever witnessed firsthand. How did these women share their husband? How did they manage jealousy? How did the kids deal with a father who needed to share himself among 4 separate households? The questions swirled in every viewer's head. And TLC knew that those questions were just what would bring viewers back week after week. The response to the show was instantaneous and explosive. Some were captivated. They never thought polygamy could look so normal. It wasn't concealed in hidden compounds or presented as abusive and oppressive, as the media had long tended to suggest it was. Here was a smiling family laughing together, eating dinner together, and announcing to the world that their love was genuine, their life was rich, and they were happy to live this way. To others, however, it was appalling in the worst sense. Religious officials decried it. Politicians were arguing back and forth as to whether it was ethical to even put such a lifestyle on television. Fans were arguing around dinner tables and on the internet as to whether this is family or just dysfunction in the guise of entertainment. And at the center of all the commotion was Kody himself, enjoying every moment of the spotlight. He loved being on camera. His persona was bigger than life, his ego unbreakable. He wasn't sorry for his decisions. To the contrary, he positioned himself nearly as a pioneer, someone gutsy enough to demonstrate to the world that polygamy was not something to be embarrassed about. He hoped people would realize the love, the collaboration, and the bond that he insisted made his family more robust than the typical one-wife family. Whether fans adored him or despised him, they couldn't help but agree on this one thing. Kody Brown was unforgettable. As the inaugural season progressed, viewers were drawn further into the everyday mayhem of the Brown brood. Kids occupied every square inch of the screen, sprinting down hallways, swarming around the dinner table, and flocking into vehicles for family excursions. Coordinating schedules for school, meals, and homework resembled a war effort. And yet, with each kiss and embrace, murmurs of stress, the wives acknowledged, sometimes begrudgingly, that jealousy existed. They shared that it was not simple to juggle time with Kody. Meri, in particular, demonstrated cracks in her self-confidence, as she found it difficult to cope with sharing her husband with women who came after her. But it was precisely this tension that made the show so addictive. Viewers couldn't look away. They wanted to see how long the harmony would last, whether the love that Kody insisted was endless could truly stretch across 4 marriages. The Browns weren't just introducing their family, they were inviting millions of people to watch every tear, every laugh, and every betrayal that would come. At the end of season 1, there was no doubt Kody Brown was a household name. He was no longer just a 4-wife man. He was the face of new-style polygamy on the national stage. His family's tale had burst into global living rooms, igniting controversy over morality, religion, freedom, and love. Some viewed him as a pioneer, others as egotistical man held captive by himself. But loathe him or love him, everyone was discussing him. Kody Brown's emergence wasn't merely about a TV program. It was about a cultural revolution, a time when a family dwelling on the margins of society stepped right into the limelight and made America face what it had long avoided. And at that instant, Kody wasn't simply a reality TV star. He was a man whose life itself had turned into controversy, spectacle, and narrative. The world couldn't help but watch. Meri Brown was the one. Before the cameras rolled, before the arguments raged, and before the celebrity status, she was the one by Kody Brown's side, when his vision of plural marriage was only a dream. It was in 1990 that Meri and Kody legally wed. And at that time, Meri was young, in love, and hopeful. She had faith in Kody, in his vision, and in the family that they would start together. They couldn't then envision the tempest that was to come their way. Meri was committed and dedicated. She devoted herself to the marriage completely, believing that her relationship with Kody would be strong enough to withstand polygamy's challenges. There were only the two of them in those initial years, and their relationship appeared to be impenetrable. But things all started shifting when the other wives came along. Each additional marriage pushed Meri to her limits of patience and heartache beyond what she ever envisioned. When Janelle became Kody's second wife in 1993, Meri struggled. She was forced to learn how to share her husband, to realize that she would no longer be at the center of his universe. She initially attempted to conceal her jealousy, rationalizing that it was acceptable within her faith and her calling. But behind closed doors, the hurt intensified. By the time Christine arrived in 1994, the family was already in transition. Meri was outnumbered, her opinion lost beneath the demands and quirks of the other women. Yet she remained. She battled to keep a seat, even when it was painful. She invested herself in motherhood, although heartache followed her there as well. Meri and Kody only had one child together, Leon, and although she loved them dearly, she had always wanted more kids. Seeing her sister wives have big families and watch her struggle with fertility was another silence she bore. In the eyes of viewers, she often appeared emotional, sometimes fragile, but underneath was a woman trying desperately to hold on to her identity in a world that constantly demanded sacrifice. When Sister Wives premiered in 2010, audiences immediately noticed the dynamic. Meri's sadness was almost impossible to hide. The audience could observe how her eyes melted when she gazed at someone else, how her smile disappeared when she felt replaced. The addition of Robyn in the first season added a new depth of hurt. Robyn was young, lively, and immediately became the center of Kody's focus. Meri, his initial wife, the woman who had been loyal to him for decades, now felt like a ghost in her own relationship. The tipping point came years later with what fans refer to now as the catfishing scandal. Lonely and feeling isolated from Kody, Meri started an online romance with a guy she thought cared deeply for her. It was an illicit exit, a last gasp bid to be seen and loved once more. It was, however, the truth that proved catastrophic. She had been catfished by a woman who posed as someone else. As soon as the news was out, it hit the national headlines. Kody was angry. The family was embarrassed. And Meri was shattered, not only by the deception of the catfish, but by seeing how unhappy she had become in her marriage. On TV, the aftermath was devastating. Meri publicly admitted her loneliness, sometimes sobbing during interviews. She said that she no longer felt Kody's wife in any meaningful way. Viewers who once judged her began to sympathize. They saw a woman who had given everything, only to feel discarded and forgotten. The scandal didn't just damage her relationship with Kody, it damaged her relationship with herself. She questioned her worth, her choices, and her place in the family she had helped create. Over the seasons, Meri's distance from Kody grew more obvious. He quit covering up his emotions, even going so far as to say on TV that he was no longer married to her in the same way that he was with his other wives. His honest remarks stung deeply, not just for Meri, but for viewers who had seen their relationship from day one. For most viewers, it was a heartless confirmation of what they had long suspected. Meri had been shoved aside, her love overridden by favoritism to Robyn. Through it all, Meri attempted to rebuild. She worked on her business ventures, on establishing her own identity independent of Kody. She posted many messages of healing and empowerment, giving glimpses of a woman learning to stand on her own 2 feet again. Her story resonated with hundreds of fans, particularly women who had felt unloved or overlooked in their relationships. In 2022, after years of not knowing, the inevitable occurred. Meri and Kody made the public declaration that they were officially ending their marriage. For some, it was a time of sorrow, the end of over 30 years of history. For others, it was a time of victory, evidence that Meri had at last chosen herself after all those decades of suffering. She moved away from the mantle of being first wife, embracing freedom, independence, and the potential of a future in which she did not have to fight for love that was never truly hers. Her narrative transformed into one of survival. From the young lady who dared believe in a dream, to the wife who went through betrayal and heartache, to the independent woman, at last taking back her life. Meri Brown's journey has been nothing less than amazing. She will always be remembered as the first wife, the one who started it all. But more importantly, she will be remembered as the woman who found the strength to walk away when love was no longer enough. And in the larger story of Kody Brown and sister wives, Meri's role is unforgettable. Without her, the foundation of the family might never have been built. Her devotion and willingness to sacrifice laid the foundation for all that would ensue. But ultimately, she demonstrated that in a world constructed of collective love, the greatest power is sometimes just loving yourself enough to walk away. When Janelle Brown arrived on the scene in Kody's life in 1993, things started changing. Unlike Meri, who was sensitive and emotional, or Christine, who would bring a bubbly warmth later on, Janelle carried a practical, peaceful presence. She was not attracted to drama. She was not seeking chaos. She was seeking stability, partnership, and a family where she could be a part of. But entering Kody's world meant entering a relationship different from anything she had ever experienced. She was the second wife in a family that would expand into a vast plural marriage. And with that decision, she embarked on a journey that was both enriching and sad in equal portions. Janelle was different from the start. She was extremely self-reliant. A woman who respected responsibility and hard work. She was the one who worked outside the home early in their marriage, bringing in a paycheck while the family was small and strapped financially. She envisioned herself as a wife. Yes, but also as a worker toward a greater dream. She had faith in Kody's vision, in the vision of a large family grounded in faith, love, and harmony. For her, plural marriage was not so much about romance as it was about structure, cooperation, and the potential for raising children in a home where they were never alone. Meri was the first wife, Janelle the second, and Christine the third. Each woman had established her niche in the family, and while the balance was precarious, it existed. But then Robyn arrived. Younger, fresh-faced, and with her not only herself, but 3 kids from a previous marriage. Her presence was the fuse that would light years of tension, suspicion, and finally the collapse of the family, as viewers knew it. Since the very beginning, when she first appeared on Sister Wives, Robyn has been different. She strode around with a type of soft poise. She smiled demurely, her voice soft, and her manner more boudoir than pragmatist. Kody was smitten from the beginning. His light shone brighter when he was around her. In a way it wasn't even apparent at first that it was doing so. He chuckled more, leaned in farther, and talked to her in a gentleness that seemed different from how he was with his other wives. For the viewers, it was obvious that something was powerful that had been introduced into the mix. A love story within a polygamous marriage, and one that would shift the balance profoundly. For the other wives, Robyn's arrival was more like a whirlwind. Meri, Janelle, and Christine had already suffered years of sharing Kody, of splitting their time, of swallowing their jealousy in order to keep the family intact. But with Robyn, things didn't feel the same. It wasn't just another wife joining the circle, it was Kody falling in love in a way that seemed stronger, more consuming, more obvious than before. Fans began calling Robyn the favorite wife, and as seasons unfolded, it was hard to argue against it. Kody defended her fiercely, prioritized her feelings, and spent time with her that other wives could only dream of. Robyn did not only bring herself to the marriage, she brought her children from the previous marriage, and Kody immediately accepted them as his own. Such an act may have been admirable, but it exacerbated the perception of favoritism. He invested energy, time, and love into Robyn's children, sometimes more overtly than he did into his older children from his previous marriages. It was a bitter pill for Meri, Janelle, and Christine to swallow. Their kids frequently felt left out, secondary, and with that resentment growing louder with each passing year. The breaking point in a lot of respects arrived in 2014, when Kody made a stunning decision. He divorced his first wife, Meri, the woman whom he had been lawfully married to since 1990. But he didn't do it because he wanted to break up with her. He did it so that he could lawfully marry Robyn and adopt her 3 children. Although the family attempted to frame it as a pragmatic one, the symbolism could not be denied. Meri was pushed aside, her legal title stripped away, and Robyn took her place as the one and only legal wife. The hurt in Meri's eyes told the whole story. Fans were outraged. For them, it was the ultimate confirmation of what they had long suspected, that Robyn was Kody's favorite, his chosen one, the true love he had always wanted. For Christine, Robyn's arrival was devastating. She admitted openly that she struggled with jealousy, that watching Kody devote so much time and energy to Robyn broke her heart. She had hoped polygamy would mean unity and equality, but instead, it meant watching the man she loved fall deeper into another woman's arms, while she was left behind. Janelle, practical as always, stayed calm on the surface, but quietly acknowledged that the balance had shifted forever. For Meri, the legal divorce, betrayal, and Kody's loss of interest drove her further towards isolation and despondence. Robyn, on her side, tended to insist that she never wished to be the favorite. She complained of guilt, of how difficult it was to be held responsible for the fractures of the family. She told him she wanted to be near her sister wives, to have genuine friendships, to care for them. But intentions did not erase reality. The plain fact was that Kody treated her differently. He defended her in fights. He slept more nights at her house. He held hands with her, kissed her more softly, and made no attempt to conceal his adoration. And as the seasons of sister wives progressed, favoritism only became more apparent. Viewers who at first were captivated by the notion of a plural family harmoniously coexisting, started turning against Kody. They accused him of being a hypocrite, of abandoning the very ideals he professed to uphold. He had preached equality, yet in reality, he had created a marriage where one was superior to the others. And despite how hard Robyn protested that she didn't want to be the favorite, the perception of her as queen of the family was ingrained. She was a polarizing woman, loved by some for her sweetness, but hated by others as the woman who destroyed the sisterhood. The bitterness grew deeper with time. Christine finally came to her breaking point, mentioning Robyn's popular girl status as among the reasons she left Kody for good in 2021. Janelle soon joined, fed up with being treated like an afterthought. Meri too finally left, realizing that her marriage had been over for years now in every sense but name. When all the dust finally settled, Robyn was the sole remaining wife, the one Kody held onto as his other marriages dissolved. To some, this was evidence that Robyn was always the true partner Kody had coveted. To others, this was evidence that favoritism upends the very fabric of plural marriage. Regardless of interpretation, one thing became evident: Robyn's entry altered the trajectory of the Brown family forever. What started out as a show about oneness and religion gradually evolved into a tale of discord, envy, and the demise of a dream. And yet, in all of it, Robyn persisted. Loved or despised, she was a focal point in one of reality TV's most fiery family melodramas. She came in as the fourth wife, but she left as the sole one. The one-time accused wife of destroying the family is now the sole survivor standing alongside Kody, evidence of just how much her introduction changed everything. It was the year 2014, and the Brown family was already in the spotlight. For 4 years, sister wives had opened the doors to the unusual life they led, exposing the challenges, jealousy, and delicate dance of plural marriage. The public had seen Meri's quiet sadness, Janelle's practicality, Christine's emotional honesty, and Robyn's new romance with Kody. But nothing could prepare viewers, or even the family themselves, for the bombshell that was about to explode in their world. Kody Brown divorcing his first and only legal wife Meri, to marry Robyn. For Meri, it was unthinkable. She had been the lawful wife since 1990, the one who had been with Kody from the start, the one who had helped establish the foundation of the family. Even when jealousy and loneliness beset her, she clung to the assurance that she had a status no one could ever strip from her. She was Kody's lawful wife. But when Kody came to her with the proposal of a divorce, that label was taken away from her. The explanation, he said, was pragmatic. He wanted to legally marry Robyn because he needed to adopt her 3 children from her first marriage. On the surface, it was a heroic thing, a father doing the right thing by stepping up and bringing stability and cohesion to children who didn't have any. But to Meri, and to millions of viewers, the symbolism was real. The man she had been married to for more than 2 decades was selecting another woman ahead of her. The cameras caught every pitiful nuance. Meri, sobbing uncontrollably, attempted to reassure herself, and everyone else, that it was mere paperwork, that it didn't alter the spiritual connection she shared with Kody. But her voice cracked as she spoke, betraying her pain. Kody, meanwhile, was matter-of-fact, brushing off the emotional weight of the decision. He said it was what needed to be done, that it wasn't about favoritism but about doing what was best for Robyn's kids. Still, the hurt in Meri's eyes told another story. This wasn't just a legal decision. It was the moment she realized that she was no longer in the running for Kody's affections. Hands were up in arms. Social media erupted in rage and outrage. People accused Kody of favoritism, of cheating on Meri, of definitively showing everyone that Robyn was his favorite wife. The story that had hung in the background since Robyn showed up suddenly became a reality. Kody wasn't merely being affectionate with her, he was legally promoting her above all the rest. He could claim it was for the kids, but to the outside world it seemed like he had decided Robyn was the only true wife. The other wives were equally pained by the divorce. Janelle attempted to be rational, recognizing the utilitarian aspects, but even she acknowledged that it was difficult to deny the power shift. Christine, as always dramatic, admitted that she just couldn't handle the symbolism. If Meri, the original wife, could be so readily dislodged, what did that say about the rest of them? Was any of their spot safe, or were they all just holding out until the day that Kody made it absolute that Robyn was his first priority? Robyn herself protested that she did not wish to bring harm. She cried on film, declaring that she never wanted to take anything from Meri, that she never asked for this. But her tears could not eliminate the fact that she was then Kody's legal wife, the one with children he adopted, the one who had documents to support her place. She had become the nucleus of the family in a way that others could not. For Meri, the divorce marked the end of the beginning. She remained within the family, but she was never the same. The loneliness she had always experienced intensified into isolation. She attempted to persuade herself that it was still a spiritual marriage, but Kody's love for her decreased more and more. They were by then strangers to each other, husband and wife, connected only by history and not by love. Soon after that, her neediness brought her into the controversial catfisting scandal. an earnest quest to be desired that just drove the wedge between her and Kody further. In hindsight, it is obvious that the legal divorce wasn't merely documentation, it was the initial fissure that would break the Brown family apart irrevocably. For Kody, the choice uncovered something that the viewers had already started to realize. He could speak of fairness, of loving his wives the same, but in action he always gravitated more towards Robyn. She was his wife in every possible way. She was the one he trusted, listened to, and claimed as such legally. His words fell short of his actions, and the message came through. Robyn was the chosen wife. The divorce also created ripple effects with the children. Some of Meri's and Christine's kids struggled with what it meant to see their mothers sidelined. They saw the favoritism just as clearly as the audience did, and it affected their relationships with Kody. Resentment built quietly but powerfully, laying the foundation for the later estrangement between Kody and several of his older children. On the surface, everyone could see the writing on the wall. This wasn't just a single legal ruling. It was the breaking point. What was originally sold as a tale of love, togetherness, and faith was disintegrating into favoritism, betrayal, and discord. Kody's vision of keeping all 4 wives under one roof began to crumble, and it began that day he divorced Meri to wed Robyn. Looking back now, years later, that single moment in 2014 feels like the hinge on which the entire story of the Brown family turned. It was the day the illusion of equality broke. It was the day Meri's pain became visible to everyone. It was the day Christine began questioning whether she could endure being invisible. It was the day Janelle understood that not even her practicality could make the marriage equal. And it was the day Robyn went from being just another wife to being the focal point of Kody's life. The legal divorce will always be one of the most controversial times in sister wives' history. To some, it was mere paperwork, a pragmatic step to safeguard children. To others, it was betrayal, the confirmation that there was a favorite and Kody wasn't afraid to display it. However it is viewed, one thing is sure: it changed everything. The Brown family was never the same again. By the time Kody's divorce from Meri was finalized in 2014, something had changed within the Brown family. They still outwardly posed as one, a polygamous family surviving on faith, commitment, and love. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to appear. Hairline fractures that would develop into great breaks no smile could conceal. The vision that Kody had once painted so boldly, of 4 wives and 18 children all under one family banner, slowly falling apart. But Janelle's personality also meant that she never clung to Kody in the same manner as Meri or Christine. She wasn't possessive. She didn't need constant affection. She knew that his time and attention would never be hers alone, and she accepted it. At least that's what she kept telling herself. Beneath her placid exterior, there were glimmers of loneliness, times when she wondered if she even had a spot in Kody's heart. Yet she remained consistent, raising their children, taking on her role, reminding herself that this was the life she had chosen. As Sister Wives premiered in 2010, viewers immediately sensed the contrast in Janelle's dynamic with Kody. She was no longer the wife always breaking down on television. She was no longer the one openly vying for his attention. Rather, she appeared to be tough, rational, and often uninvolved in the emotional wars that raged within the family. Audiences admired her. They regarded her as the glue holding things together while everyone else was coming undone. She labored, managed a budget, and kept her priorities on the health of her kids over Kody's attention politics. But practicality came with a price. Viewers started to question if Janelle and Kody even shared much of a marriage at all. While Christine freely declared her need for love, and Meri released her hurt, Janelle seemed to just exist with Kody more than anything else. Even Kody himself would go on to confess on camera that he felt his relationship with Janelle was more friendship than romance. It was a union, sure. But was it a marriage? In spite of this, Janelle and Kody had 6 children together, and she gave it her all to be a mother. She taught her children to think for themselves, to seek independence, and not to ever be afraid to question authority. Yes, even Kody's. Eventually this caused tension, as some of Janelle's older kids fought with their father, believing that he preferred Robyn and her children over everyone else. Janelle frequently found herself in the middle, trying to help her children and have peace with Kody at the same time. Her loyalty was repeatedly tested, and the calm nature of hers was strained to the breaking point. During the COVID-19 era, those fissures turned into chasms. Kody enforced strict rules on the family, rules which Janelle and her independent thinking children frequently did not agree with. They thought his expectations were controlling, even unreasonable. Passionate arguments broke out, and Janelle, who was normally the peacekeeper, was compelled to stand up for herself. She defiantly rebelled against Kody in front of the cameras, informing him that her children were more important than anything, and she wasn't going to forfeit their independence in order to gratify him. The fans applauded her, viewing her as a strength and defiance that had long been concealed behind her placid demeanor. For the first time, the world witnessed Janelle not only as the pragmatic wife, but as the combatant. She spoke out against Kody's favoritism, especially his excessive loyalty to Robyn. She charged him with leaving their older kids behind in order to shield his newest family. And although her tone was firm and calm, the hurt beneath was apparent. Years of tolerance and sacrifice had mounted to frustration that could no longer be suppressed. The breaking point was late 2022, when Janelle finally came clean on what fans had long suspected: her marriage to Kody was over. On tape, she informed him bluntly that their partnership had diminished to nothing. They had no romance, no actual partnership, nothing but memories and kids holding them together. She turned her back, not with tears, but with quiet resolve. In contrast to the dramatic and emotional way Christine left, Janelle's departure was steadfast, unchanging, and determined, just as she had always been. Her choice shook the fan base. Everyone had regarded Janelle as the single wife who could make it to the end, the one who could tolerate Kody's favoritism because she did not require constant praise. But ultimately, even her patience failed her. Her independence, the same independence that made her so resilient, was also the reason she was gone. She no longer needed Kody. She understood she had never really needed him. Once the divorce happened, Janelle flourished in ways the audience had never witnessed. She worked on her health, her own self-improvement, and her own future outside of Kody. She maintained her business pursuits, developed into a role as a grandmother, and showed the world that she was more than the second wife in a plural marriage. She was who she was, and she could create a life of love and happiness in her own way. In retrospect, Janelle's narrative within the Brown family is one of strength. She came in as the reserved, pragmatic second wife, committed to constructing Kody's vision. She faced years of isolation, favoritism, and abandonment, and she never lost herself. And when the moment arrived, she departed without bitterness, bearing within her the strength that had characterized her the entire time. In so many ways, her departure was the strongest of them all, for it was not motivated by anger or sorrow, but by clarity and respect for self. Janelle Brown's story unveiled a reality that millions of people could relate to. Sometimes being strong doesn't mean holding on. Sometimes being strong means letting go. And for Janelle, walking away from Kody wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. One where she finally prioritized herself. Christine Brown's tale is one of love, heartache, and ultimately, freedom. When she married into Kody's clan in 1994 as the third wife, she arrived on the scene with a smile, a big personality, and a vision of what plural marriage should be. Christine was raised in the belief in polygamy. To her, it was not odd or immoral. It was the way she had envisioned her life. She desired sister wives as her best friends, a loving husband, and children raised in an atmosphere of boundless warmth. In her mind, she believed she was entering a fairy tale, a life of living faith, joy, and collective strength. Fairy tales are brittle, however, and Christine soon realized that reality is frequently more brutal than fantasy. During those early years, she immersed herself in motherhood. She became the caregiver not just to her own kids but to the entire family. Cooking, cleaning, caregiving, Christine did the work that made the home a home. Her laughter rang out in the rooms. Her calm eased the rough edges of plural marriage, and for many years, she talked herself into believing this was enough. She had Kody's attention at times. She had children's bond always. and she had the conviction that her sacrifices were for the whole good of the family. But even though she smiled externally, suspicions arose internally. Kody's attention was already being torn between Meri and Janelle when Christine joined the marriage, and she often found herself feeling like the third wheel, the afterthought. In contrast to Janelle, who was more practical and self-reliant, Christine yearned for love. She craved romance. She craved to feel special. But in a family where love had to be rationed, Christine constantly waited for a gentle touch or a kind word that was mischievously withheld. Her happy-go-lucky nature hid a profound yearning that never disappeared. When the cameras came to Sister Wives in 2010, Christine attempted to keep up her bright, sunny persona. But as the seasons progressed, the cracks in her marriage were too big to ignore. She complained repeatedly. She acknowledged jealousy. She acknowledged hurt. She acknowledged that it wasn't easy sharing her husband like she had thought. The fans bonded with her right away. They recognized in Christine something authentic. A woman who wished to be loved and love, but who was always being overlooked. She wasn't hesitant to cry on television, to be vulnerable, and that authenticity made her one of the most popular people on the show. Things hit a boiling point with the introduction of Robyn, the fourth wife. From the first time Robyn joined the family, Christine began to see her position move further out of reach. Kody's favoritism toward Robyn was evident. He smiled in a different way with her, talked more softly, and appeared to put her needs over the rest. For Christine, this favoritism was catastrophic. She no longer had to struggle merely for attention. She had to deal with the possibility that her husband loved someone else more than he ever loved her. The agony of that discovery was nigh unbearable, and it unfolded for millions of watchers who saw her despair play out. Christine endured for years. She told herself it was her responsibility. She told herself she'd made the right decision. She reminded herself that staying was the only choice. For her children, for her beliefs, and for the image of togetherness the family worked so desperately to maintain. But the reality was consuming her. Each holiday that she felt excluded from, each conversation that she felt discounted, each smile Kody gave to Robyn that he no longer bestowed on her, it all accumulated until the burden was too heavy to bear. It all fell apart when Kody unequivocally told her he was no longer attracted to Christine. His words sliced deeper than a blade. They weren't merely a rejection of her as a wife. They were a rejection of her as a woman, as a partner, as a being worthy of love. At that moment, something inside Christine changed. The bubbly caregiving woman who had always prioritized everyone else had the sudden realization that she couldn't spend the remaining years of her life living in the shadow of a man who no longer valued her. She started dreaming of an alternate future, a future where she was independent, where she could love and be loved in return, where she was not fighting for crumbs of love. In 2021, Christine took the biggest risk of her life. She made public her decision to leave Kody, bringing an end to over 25 years of spiritual marriage. The announcement left fans worldwide in shock. Some of them were devastated. Others were applauding, but all of them understood the strength it required for Christine to leave. She gathered her belongings, abandoned the family home, and relocated to Utah to begin a new life for her children. On television, she candidly explained why. She declared she wanted to be happy. She declared she deserved love. She declared she would no longer be treated as less than. Her exit was a turning point not only for the family, but for the entire show. Overnight, the ideal picture of harmony was broken. Christine's absence created a gap that could not be filled, and Kody's plural marriage empire started to crumble. Other wives started questioning their own relationships, and the family dynamics were altered forever. Christine's choice was bigger than personal. It was a revolution within the Brown family. After she left, Christine thrived. She smiled more, laughed more, and glowed with a happiness that fans had not witnessed in years. She started new projects, reveled in her independence, and even fell in love once more. Her story served as an inspiration to millions of viewers, but particularly to women who felt trapped in relationships where they were marginalized. Christine showed them that it was never too late to choose yourself, never too late to insist on the love and respect you deserve. In retrospect, Christine's saga is one that transcends reality TV. She went into plural marriage with faith and optimism, suffered years of anguish and self-denial, and finally found the courage to leave. She demonstrated to the world that vulnerability is not weakness, honesty is strength, and courage sometimes involves walking away from the life you believe you desire, in order to find the life you deserve. Kody Brown's tale is more than polygamy or reality show intrigue. It is about all the individuals who have ever felt invisible, unloved, and overlooked in a relationship. It is about the courage it takes to yell enough. It is about the ugliness of finding yourself again after being lost for so many years. And in the epic story of Kody Brown and his wives, Kody will always be remembered as the one who was brave enough to get out, to put her happiness first, and to prove to the world that love is never something you need to beg for. When Robyn Brown joined the life of Kody in 2010, all things changed. Until then, the Brown family had their tensions, their jealousies, and their conflicts, but the hierarchy was established. The first cracks in these were in the children. As the older children matured, they started to observe the world from their own perspective and not just from the lessons of their father. They saw how differently their mothers were treated. They noticed how Robyn's children seemed to get more of Kody's time, more of his energy, more of his affection. They noticed how Kody's tears went unanswered, how Meri's loneliness was brushed aside, how even Janelle's practicality couldn't shield her from Kody's favoritism. Some of the kids spoke about it quietly, others more openly, but the divide between Kody and his older children began to widen. The pandemic years exposed these tensions. COVID-19 upended everything for families around the globe, and for the Browns, it was a turning point. Kody demanded rigid rules that in his head were needed to keep everyone safe. But how he applied them made his favoritism more apparent than ever. Although several of his older kids were shut out, angry over what they perceived as controlling behavior, Robyn and her children stayed close to him. He spent more time with them, rationalizing it as a means of protecting one household. To the other wives and kids, however, it seemed like abandonment. Janelle's sons in turn rebelled. They craved their independence. They did not want to stay under their father's draconian rule, and they did not hesitate to make it clear. Quarrels broke out, tempers flared, and before long, the gulf between Kody and his elder children became estrangement. A few would not even meet with him. Others told him outright that they no longer respected him. For the man who had once dreamed of himself as proud patriarch to a sprawling empire of children, this rejection hurt deep, though he seldom conceded it. Rather, he intensified, attributing fault to the wives for not upholding his rules, fingering Kody, fingering Janelle, even fingering Meri. But never Robyn. Behind the marriages, the fissures widened into chasms. Kody, exhausted from years of neglect, stood on the brink of despair. She had struggled so hard to make plural marriage function, to try to believe that she could survive, but the pandemic made it clear to her. Kody was no longer her husband in anything but name. When she saw him fawn over Robyn, when she heard him yell at her children and be sweet to Robyn's, she was done. To her, the fissures in the empire weren't only apparent, they were intolerable. Janelle also started running out of patience. She had been the practical one, the voice of reason, the partner who did not require too much emotionally for years. But even she couldn't help but notice the imbalance anymore. She saw her children fight with their dad, Kody standing up for Robyn, and speaking out against everyone else, and she started to see that her marriage was more than just a hollow thing. It wasn't full of love and partnership. It was full of hollow words and silent resentment. Her own patience, once her strongest virtue, was wearing thin to nothing. Meri, who had been distant since the split, pulled back even more. The catfishing fiasco had embarrassed her, and Kody had shown no restraint. He had stated outright that he did not think of himself as still being married to her. He acknowledged he had no feelings of romance for her, and yet she remained, holding on to the possibility that in some way, somehow, things would turn around. But the fissures had become too large. She was a ghost in her own marriage, being there but not visible. All the while, Kody continued to tell the family he was the leader, the one in charge, the one keeping it all together. But his leadership had become authoritarian and defensive, rather than the charismatic and confident one it had been once. Rather than inspiring loyalty, he bred resentment. Rather than uniting his wives, he drove them further apart. And rather than developing his children, he pushed many of them away. It was noticed by the public. Sister Wives fans, who had previously watched to be amazed by the strange shape of a polygamous family, now watched to see the downfall. Criticism of Kody spread on social media. The public accused him of hypocrisy, of favoritism, of not being as good as his word. The proud patriarch image began to break down in the eyes of the public, as it was breaking down in his own family. By the time Christine broke the news that she was leaving in 2021, Kody's attempted empire had already broken down irreparably. Her leaving was not merely the departure of one wife, it was the destruction of the fantasy that plural marriage had succeeded for them. Christine's bravery to leave cast a spotlight on the cracks that had been evident all along. After she departed, everyone, both within and outside the family, realized that the system Kody had struggled so much to uphold was falling apart. The cracks in the empire were no longer secret. They permeated everything, between Kody and his kids, between wives themselves, and even within marriages that still existed. What had been touted as unity had been revealed as division. What had been represented as strength had been proven to be weakness. And what had seemed to be love was actually favoritism, resentment, and broken vows. For Kody Brown, the man who had stood before cameras in 2010 with a large smile and an even larger dream, it was the end of the beginning. His empire was fracturing, and however hard he tried to keep the fragments of it together, they were pouring through his fingers. By the time Christine once and for all stood between herself and Kody Brown and said she was walking in 2021, the foundations of the family had already been in disintegration for years. But the move sparked a fire that could not be silenced. The minute one wife left, the others started asking themselves the same uncomfortable questions. Was this actually the life they had wanted? Was this actually love they were worthy of? Could they continue to pretend that everything was okay when the reality was scribbled on every chilly stare, every skipped vacation, every night Kody was somewhere other than home? The demise had started, and no speech nor explanation could keep it intact anymore. Christine was the initial casualty, but she didn't leave overnight. It was the result of years of neglect, years of hearing Kody downplay her wants, years of seeing him give his love to Robyn while giving her nothing but annoyance and indifference. The tipping point was when Kody informed her, in front of the cameras, that he was no longer attracted to her. The callousness of those words appalled viewers, but for Christine, it was the validation she had been waiting for. She was worthy of love, and she was not going to beg for scraps of it anymore. So she gathered her belongings, took her children, and departed. She picked herself for the first time in over 2 decades, instead of the marriage. Her bravery echoed within the family. The audience saw her shine, as she started creating a new life for herself in Utah. She laughed again, her smile broadened, and she walked with the air of a woman finally free. Her fans cheered for her, holding her up as a testament that leaving a loveless marriage wasn't failure, triumph. And as Christine's joy grew, the other wives couldn't help but glimpse what was possible beyond Kody's shadow. Janelle became the next to break. She'd always been the pragmatic one, the wife who stayed level-headed when others fought, the one who didn't ask for much from Kody emotionally. Years passed and people thought she would be the one to survive the longest, to maintain the peace even when her own heart wasn't being satisfied. But as Christine departed and Janelle observed her flourish, something changed within her. She started examining more closely her own marriage, her own demands, and the relationship she had with Kody. What she saw was not love. It was an arrangement. It was history. It was convenience. But it was not a marriage. The pandemic only widened the gap between Janelle and Kody. Her kids disagreed with him, resentful of his stern rules and bias. Janelle, fiercely loyal to her children, took their side over her husband's. The yelling escalated, the quiet became colder, until at last she confessed the reality. She and Kody were no longer in a relationship. It wasn't dramatic like Christine's departure. It wasn't teary-eyed or yelling. It was peaceful, serene, but definitive. She strolled away with her head high, holding on to her independence like a banner. For Janelle, exile wasn't a tantrum. It was a clarion call. And then Meri. Her tale had been one of tragedy for decades, long before Christine and Janelle departed. The original wife, the woman who had originally been Kody's legal spouse, she had been relegated legally and emotionally. The divorce in 2014, to enable Kody to marry Robyn, had been the initial knife in her heart, and the catfishing scandal had been the second. Kody had indicated, repeatedly, that he had no desire to rekindle their marriage. He told her publicly, on camera, that he no longer loved her like that he did not even want to have sex with her again. And yet Meri remained, holding on to the possibility that things could change. Fans pleaded with her for years to leave. They watched her embarrassments, her loneliness, her crying, and they wanted her to rescue herself. But it was several years longer before Meri reached the point of no return. Seeing Christine and Janelle go first planted the seed. Watching them live their new lives, seeing them smile without Kody, made her see that she could too choose herself. And lastly, in 2023, she made official what everyone had known for decades. Her marriage was dead. Silently, with no pyrotechnics, she disappeared from Kody, closing the book on a relationship that had long since perished before the cameras even showed up. The wives disappeared one by one, leaving only Robyn. The lady who entered last was now the last one standing, the lone remaining married to Kody. To some, this was evidence that she had always been the favorite, the only one he had ever really wanted. To others, it was a tragic ending, an indication that polygamy had not worked, that one big happy family was never more than an illusion. The wives had dedicated decades of their lives to a man who promised equality, but gave favoritism. And at the end, they all departed behind, with the wounds of what they had been put through, and the resilience of what they survived. The wives leaving didn't just signify the dissolution of marriages. It signified the dissolution of the empire Kody had invested his life in. His vision of being the patriarch of a unified, successful polygamous family was destroyed. The harmony he had once boasted about was no more. The family meals, the holidays shared, the picture of peace, all were shattered. Instead, there were shattered marriages, estranged children, and a man standing alone with just one wife at his side. For viewers, the breakdown was both tragic and compelling. They had watched these women for more than a decade, had seen them weep, had seen them fight, had seen them love. To watch them finally walk away was to witness the climax of a story that had been unfolding all along. It was raw, it was real, and it was powerful. Christine's bold exit, Janelle's quiet strength, Meri's long-awaited release. They each told a story of women finding their voices after years of silence. The wives leaving home wasn't the end of love. It was the start of a new life. Christine discovered love again, not only in her children but in her love life. Janelle loved being independent and taking care of herself, her family, and her freedom. Meri regained her strength, proving to the world that she was stronger than her suffering. As a group, they were symbols of strength, evidence that one can always begin anew. For Kody, it was the reverse. The wives' departure left him vulnerable, without the facade he had so diligently cultivated. He was simply a man with a single wife, holding on to the fantasy that had already collapsed. His leadership was called into question, his honor bruised, and his position of patriarch relegated to remembrance. The wives departed, but they did not walk into blackness. They stepped into light, into freedom, into futures they could create on their own terms. And in doing so, they proved something that had been in plain sight the whole time, that sometimes leaving is the most courageous thing you can do. Kody Brown once stood before the world as the assertive patriarch of a vast polygamous family. 4 wives, 18 kids, and a vision of togetherness made him a household name. But now that vision is shattered. Christine departed first, preferring happiness to heartache. Janelle followed, weary of being ignored. Meri, after years of isolation, finally acknowledged her marriage had been dead for years. And one by one, they departed, leaving Robyn alone. Kody is no longer that smiling man who brought America his big love lifestyle. He is now a man engulfed in suspicion of favoritism, broken trust, and shattered relationships with most of his older children. His once boastful love empire has shrunk down to one marriage, and even that one is tainted by the bitterness of what was lost. The judgment of time is unmistakable. The Browns' narrative was never about togetherness. It was about strife, sacrifice, and finding genuine love. Freedom for the wives meant walking away. For Kody, it meant confronting the destruction of the empire he created. And to the world observing, it was a reminder that dreams are not always destined to endure.